YouTube followers, welcome to the Pelvic Floor Solution. You're going to like this video, so click the thumbs up, subscribe. Alrighty, let's get started. Today you're going to understand the incredible way your nervous system determines how your bladder works. This video is going to give you information as to what you can do to improve bladder function, restore, and also maintain bladder control. If you've not seen our website, PhilAtes.com, take note that you need to check it out. But wait until this very interesting video is over. My name is Dr. Bruce Crawford. I'm a board-certified urogynecologist, and I created the PhilAtes method of pelvic floor training that has helped thousands of women and men take back bladder control. This simple program involves 2 movements you can do for 5 minutes a day to achieve success in as little as 28 days of training. The reason PhilAtes works so well will be explained in this brief review of how your nervous system works and how you can change the way it is working to now restore bladder control. Are you ready? Let's get started. Are you ready? Let's talk about the nervous system. The first concept I need you to be familiar with, concept number 1, is that there are 2 main components of the nervous system in mammals. The central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system includes the nerves that lead from the spinal cord and go to your muscles and skin and internal organs. The second concept you need to understand is that there are 2 main components of the peripheral nervous system. They are the somatic nervous system, the portion that brings nerve supply to your muscles and skin, and also the autonomic nervous system, the portion that regulates the function of your internal organs, your heart, your lungs, intestine, and also the bladder. The third main concept is that all nerves are 2-way streets. In one lane, information is carried from the muscles, skin, and organs back to the spinal cord and brain. These are called sensory nerves. In the other lane, information is carried from the spinal cord to the muscles, the skin, and organs, and it affects those organs' function. These are called motor nerves. The fourth concept is that sensory information from somatic nerves helps to regulate the motor nerves of the autonomic nervous system. This is very important. This is how PhilAtes works. All right, here is a diagram of the autonomic nervous system. This is a self-regulating system, meaning that you don't, very fortunately, have to think about how to regulate things like your heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, bowel function, or bladder function. This is really good news. Can you imagine if you had to add all of that to the list of things to do during the day, not to mention while you sleep? You see, the autonomic nervous system regulates itself by consisting of 2 separate elements that pretty much have the opposite effect on any organ function. The parasympathetic element lowers heart rate while the sympathetic element increases heart rate. And it's basically like that for all of your organs. One part increases while the other part decreases. When it comes to bladder function, the parasympathetic element makes your bladder try to empty while the sympathetic element makes your bladder stay relaxed. So if you have overactive bladder, you can quiet it down by increasing sympathetic input to the bladder, or you can do the same thing by decreasing parasympathetic input to the bladder. Some bladder pills block parasympathetic input. These are the older medications that are notorious for causing dry mouth, constipation, while some newer bladder pills increase sympathetic input, but they have the same effect, quieting down the tendency of the bladder to contract without your permission. Okay, so while your brains are processing all of that, let's have a little bit of fun, because this is kind of incredible. Let's talk about your emotional state. To a large extent, the emotional state you are aware of, mad, glad, scared, sad, is not a consequence of events so much, although it feels that way, but rather it's a consequence of your autonomic state. The autonomic state of your body is interpreted by your conscious mind as mad, glad, scared, or sad, and experienced as that feeling. Now, these states feel so real that it is difficult to understand that they are the consequence of your physiology rather than the cause of your physiology. However, if you can get to the point where you're willing to entertain the possibility, you soon realize that it puts you in a very powerful position. You see, if your feelings are the response to your physiology rather than the cause of your physiologic state, you can, at least in theory, change your emotional state by changing your physiologic state. Take a minute and try and digest that. Isn't that interesting? Now let's go over this slide. Here at the top, you see a gross simplification of your physiologic state. Relaxed versus stressed. In the relaxed state, you're in the ideal position to deal with 99% of what the world demands of you. This balanced autonomic state, i.e., just enough parasympathetic, just enough sympathetic input, is ideal for things like creativity, joy, optimism, love. As we move into the stress state, things can go one of two different ways. Some people, in some situations, will become parasympathetic dominant. And this experience, I should say, the experience of this physiologic state might be interpreted by your brain as depression, hopelessness, procrastination. Others might have a physiologic response to the same situation and become overly excited, experience fight or flight, anxiety. They might be fearful. This idea implies that there are things you can do to move your physiologic state back towards the balanced autonomic state using certain techniques. So, if you're tending to be too vagal or parasympathetic dominant, you can boost sympathetic activity with exercise, sauna, cold, humor. If you're tending to be too sympathetic, anxious, etc., you can boost the parasympathetic state with things like meditation, yoga, breathing techniques, or simply rest. Either way, you are rebalancing your autonomic state in a way that puts you back into a more pleasant and more productive physiology. Cool, right? Anyway, back to the subject at hand. On this slide is kind of one example of how you can adjust your physiology to improve symptoms of overactive bladder. Overactive bladder, as you probably know, is a condition characterized by having to urinate too often or not making it to the bathroom in time. It affects millions of people and is a big-time quality of life issue. If you have it, you know that's true. For most people, this is the consequence of dysregulation of the autonomic nerve supply to the bladder. Too much parasympathetic input to the bladder. So, to adjust that, you would want to do something to decrease the net parasympathetic input to the bladder. We just talked about this. You remember? Well, one of those things is exercise. To some extent, any type of vigorous exercise probably works, but exercise that involves muscle that get their nerve supply from the same spinal cord level as the organ you want to regulate seems to work best. So in this case, we're talking about the bladder. Now, the pelvic floor muscles, your Kegel muscles, your PfilAtes muscles, well, they get their nerve supply, their somatic nerve supply, the one you have voluntary control over, from the second third, and fourth spinal cord roots, the nerves that come off the second, third, and fourth segment of the sacral spinal cord. Every time these muscles contract, they send a signal back to the spinal cord, sensory signal, at the same level as the motor nerves that cause them to contract arise from. The parasympathetic nerves to the bladder that tend to make your bladder too sensitive or to contract when you don't want it to also come from the second, third, and fourth sacral spinal cord level. Somehow, the somatic sensory input back to the spinal cord helps regulate the parasympathetic motor output to the bladder. This interaction between the somatic and autonomic systems may take place at the level of the spinal cord or within the brain, or perhaps both, probably both. And that is why pelvic floor exercise works to treat overactive bladder. So this is basically the logic that underpins the concept of using fitness as medicine. You may have had a sense that this was true, but now you know why this is true. I hope you found it interesting. If so, like the video and share it with someone. Subscribe to the channel and comment below to give us the feedback we need to continue to bring you interesting and useful content. I'm Dr. Bruce Crawford, board-certified urogynecologist, saying thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching. We'll be talking to you soon.